During a family trip, I woke up on a small boat adrift. Just me and my 12-year-old daughter. Only a handwritten note remained. "Mom, I'm sorry, but you left us no choice." Or, at that moment, I realized my love had been turned into a weapon. But too bad for them, I survived. I'm glad you're here. That hooked the boat, the betrayal. That's where my nightmare started. How'd you find this story? Comment your platform below. Fair warning, this blends fact and storytelling. Names changed, details dramatized. But the truth about survival and forgiveness, the heat woke me before anything else. Not the gentle warmth of morning sun through bedroom curtains. This was different, aggressive. The kind of heat that presses down on your chest and steals the moisture from your mouth before you even open your eyes. I tried to move. My limbs felt heavy, disconnected. My head throbbed with a dull ache that pulsed behind my temples. For a moment, I couldn't remember where I was. Couldn't remember anything beyond the fog filling every corner of my mind. Then I opened my eyes. Blue. Endless, blinding blue stretched above me. I blinked, trying to focus, and felt it. The gentle rocking motion beneath me, the smell of water and sun-baked metal. I wasn't in my bed, I wasn't in the rental house, I was on a boat. Panic tried to claw its way up my throat, but something in me pushed it back down. Instead, clarity came, sharp and cold despite the suffocating heat. I sat up slowly, fighting the dizziness. My mouth was dry tongue, thick and cottony. How long had I been unconscious? That's when I saw her. Abigail. My daughter lay curled beside me, still wearing her life vest. Her face was flushed, the bridge of her nose already showing signs of sunburn. Her lips were cracked, but her chest rose and fell in steady rhythm. She was breathing. She was alive. Thank God. I touched her forehead, warm but not dangerously hot. Her pulse was steady. Whatever had happened to us, she was okay. For now. I pulled the blanket over her head, creating shade. Then I forced myself to look around. Water. In every direction. The surface of Lake Mojave stretched out like liquid glass, reflecting the merciless Arizona sun. No other boats, no shoreline close enough to matter. No sound except the gentle lap of water against aluminum and the awful oppressive silence that comes from being truly alone. My hands moved on autopilot, checking the boat. The engine key slot was empty. I looked for the oars. The ropes were still tied to their cleats, but the oars themselves were gone. I searched the storage compartments. No flares, no whistle, no radio, nothing. Someone had stripped this boat of everything we needed. That's when my eyes landed on the thermos, the one Heather had handed me this morning with that perfect smile. "Drink up, Mom. Herbal tea. It'll help with the heat." I picked it up and sniffed. Chamomile, maybe. Honey. But underneath something else. Something bitter and wrong. My stomach turned. Then I saw it. A piece of paper folded neatly and pinned under a smooth rock near my bag. My hands shook as I lifted the rock and unfolded the note. The handwriting was Warren's. I'd know it anywhere. "I'm sorry, Mom, but you left us no choice." No signature? No explanation? Just those words written in my son's careful script. I read it once, twice, 3 times, trying to make it mean something different, trying to make it not real. But the truth was there, in the empty engine, in the missing oars, in the drug-laced tea, in the fact that Warren and Heather were nowhere to be seen. My body went cold despite the heat pressing down on us. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't some terrible misunderstanding. My son did this. My son Warren, the boy I'd raised, the man I'd helped through every hardship, had drugged me, disabled this boat, and left me and his 12-year-old sister alone in the middle of Lake Mojave, to die. And the person who planned it was my own child. 3 days before I woke up on that boat, I was sitting at my kitchen table in Chandler, Arizona, trying to balance a budget that refused to balance. It was past midnight. The house was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator. Abigail had fallen asleep on the couch again, math homework spread across the coffee table, her oversized hoodie pulled over her head. "My name is Diane Sullivan. I'm 52 years old. I've been a widow for 3 years. My husband Abigail's father died in a car accident on a Tuesday." I still can't think about without my chest tightening. These days, I work as a freelance accountant. It's not much, but it keeps us afloat. Life had been quiet since Michael died. Small, manageable. Just me and Abigail in our 3-bedroom house making do. Then 2 months ago, everything changed. My older sister Clara passed away. Cancer took her fast. She left me something in her will, a plot of land in Mojave County, 20 acres of desert scrub I'd never seen, until I found out what it was worth, $5.5 million. The appraiser had said it so casually, like he was talking about the weather. A massive development project was coming through. Data centers, logistics hubs. With the right buyer, that land could sell for 15, even 20 million. I'd stared at that appraisal report for a long time. That kind of money could change everything. Abigail's college fund, a house without a leaking roof, maybe even retirement that didn't involve working until I dropped dead. Then Warren started calling, my son, 33 years old from my first marriage. We'd always had a complicated relationship. After his father and I divorced, Warren bounced between us, never quite settling. As an adult, he'd become distant. Polite, but distant. Holidays and birthday texts, that was about it, until the land. Suddenly, Warren was calling 3 times a week, texting daily, always the same topic. Mom, you need to protect that asset. Put it in a family trust. It'll save you on taxes. Keep it safe. At first, I thought he was being helpful. Then the calls became more insistent, more urgent. You don't understand how vulnerable you are right now. People will take advantage. You need to do this. For Abigail. Something about it felt wrong. The pressure, the urgency, the way he never quite looked me in the eye on video calls anymore. Then 2 weeks ago, I was helping Abigail with homework on the family iPad when I saw it. An email Warren had left open. He'd forgotten to log out. The subject line made my blood run cold. Rematernal capacity evaluation and minor guardianship options. I clicked before I could stop myself. Warren to a family lawyer. Careful clinical language. Concerned son worried about recently widowed mother. Potential grief-related instability. Legal options for ensuring proper care of minor child in the event of parental incapacity. He wasn't just coming for the land. He was preparing to come for Abigail. I closed the email with shaking hands. Didn't confront him. I just watched and waited. 3 days later, Heather called. Warren's wife. We'd never been close. Always perfectly polite, perfectly put together, perfectly impossible to read. Diane High Warren and I are renting this amazing house near Lake Mojave next weekend. Family bonding time. We'd love for you and Abigail to join us just a couple days. Relaxation, no phones, no stress. I should have said no. Every instinct was screaming at me to say no. But then Abigail overheard. Her face lit up in a way I hadn't seen in months. Mom, can we please? I miss Warren. It's been forever since we did anything as a family. I looked at my daughter's hopeful face, at the iPad with that email burned into my memory, at the phone in my hand, and I said yes, not because I trusted Warren, not because I thought everything was fine, but because I needed to know. I needed to see exactly what my son was planning. I got my answer, and it almost killed me. The house was perfect. White walls, soft lighting, a view of the mountains that looked like it belonged on a postcard. Too perfect, like a stage set for something terrible. Warren met us at the door. His smile was wide practiced. Mom, you made it. I hadn't seen him in 3 months. He looked thinner, tired. His eyes flickered over me, assessing, measuring, before landing on Abigail. Hey, kiddo, he said. Abigail grinned and hugged him. She still loved her big brother. She didn't know what I knew, didn't see what I saw. Heather appeared behind him, blonde and poised in a linen sundress. Diane, we're so glad you're here. She kissed my cheek, cool, efficient. Come in. I'll show you to your room. The house was spacious. Open-plan living room kitchen with granite counters, sliding glass doors that opened onto a deck overlooking Lake Mojave. Everything gleamed. Everything smelled like lemon cleaner and something floral I couldn't place. You're over here, Heather said, leading me down a short hallway past the kitchen. She opened a door near the garage. "We thought you'd like some privacy." The room was fine. Queen bed, cream-colored duvet, a window facing the driveway, but it was far from the main bedrooms. Isolated. "Abigail's upstairs with us," Heather added. "She'll love it. There's a loft with board games." I nodded, smiled, said thank you, but something coiled tight in my chest. Dinner was a barbecue on the deck. Warren grilled chicken and vegetables while Heather set the table with cloth napkins and iced tea in mason jars. Abigail ran around the yard chasing lizards. The sun sank behind the ridgeline, painting the sky orange and purple. It should have been nice, but Warren barely looked at me. When I asked him about work, he answered in clipped sentences. When I mentioned the land in Mojave County, his jaw tightened. "We should talk about that," Heather said smoothly, passing me a bowl of coleslaw. "Estate planning, making sure everything's protected." "I have a will," I said, "but a trust is better," she continued, "especially with Abigail. You want to make sure she's taken care of if—" "I'm 52, I interrupted. "Not dying." Heather's smile didn't waver. "Of course, just smart planning." Warren said nothing. He stared at his plate, chewing slowly. That night, I lay in the isolated bedroom near the garage, staring at the ceiling. The air conditioning hummed. Outside, crickets chirped. But I couldn't sleep. Around midnight, I heard voices. I sat up, held my breath. Warren and Heather were on the deck. Their voices were low, muffled by the sliding door, but I caught fragments. "Tomorrow, just stick to the plan." "What if she won't, trust me." Silence. Then footsteps inside, a door closing. I lay back down. My heart hammered against my ribs. I should have grabbed Abigail right then. Walked out to the car, driven back to Chandler, locked the doors, and called a lawyer. But I didn't. I told myself I was being paranoid, that I'd misheard, that my son wouldn't hurt me. I told myself I'd keep my eyes open, stay alert, see what tomorrow brought. That hesitation almost cost us everything. The morning started with smiles and coffee. By noon, I was fighting to stay conscious. I woke to the smell of bacon. When I came into the kitchen, Heather was already at the stove, hair pulled back in a ponytail, humming softly. Warren sat at the table, scrolling through his phone. Abigail was pouring orange juice. "Morning, Mom," Warren said without looking up. "Good morning." I poured myself coffee. My hands were steady, but my mind wasn't. I kept hearing last night's whisper. "Tomorrow. Stick to the plan." "We're thinking we'll head out around 10, Heather said brightly. "The lake's gorgeous in the morning, not too crowded yet." "Sounds good," I said. After breakfast, Heather prepared a large thermos. She filled it carefully, added honey stirred. "Herbal tea," she explained. "Chamomile and mint. It helps with motion sickness. The water out there can get choppy." I watched her screw the lid tight. She smiled at me. "You'll love it." At the marina, Warren handled everything. He spoke to the attendant, a middle-aged man with a weathered face and a name tag that read, Jerry Wallace. Jerry handed over keys to 2 small motorboats. Warren nodded along, but I noticed he spent a long time checking the engine on one of them. Too long. "Why 2 boats?" I asked. "More fun that way," Warren said. "You and Abigail can have some mom-daughter time. We'll stay close." Abigail's eyes lit up. "Can I steer, Mom?" I hesitated, but she looked so excited, so trusting. "Sure, sweetheart." We loaded into separate boats, Warren and Heather in one, Abigail and I in the other. The sun was already high, the air shimmering with heat. Lake Mojave stretched out before us, blue and endless. Warren started his engine first. Ours sputtered, then caught. We followed them out onto the water. For the first 20 minutes, it was almost peaceful. The boats stayed close, maybe 50 feet apart. Abigail laughed as spray hit her face. I kept one hand on the wheel, the other shading my eyes. Then Heather stood up in their boat and waved us closer. "Diane, take this." She held up the thermos. I pulled alongside. She handed it across. "Drink up. It's hot out here. You need to stay hydrated." The tea was cool, slightly sweet. It tasted like mint and something else I couldn't place. A voice in my head whispered, "Don't drink it." But I told myself I was being paranoid. that a thermos of tea couldn't be dangerous. Abigail drank first, then passed it to me. I took a long swallow. "Thanks," I called. Heather smiled. "Of course." Warren started his engine again. Their boat pulled ahead just a little. We kept going. 10 minutes later, my head felt heavy, my limbs sluggish. I blinked hard, trying to clear my vision. "Mom." Abigail's voice sounded far away. "I'm really tired." "Me too, baby." I looked toward Warren's boat. It was farther now, maybe 100 yards, then 200. "Warren!" I tried to shout. My voice came out weak, barely a whisper. Abigail slumped against the side of the boat, eyes fluttering closed. I reached for her, but my arm felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. I looked back. Their boat was smaller now, a white speck on the blue. Heather stood in the back. She wasn't waving. She was just watching. I tried to start the engine. My fingers fumbled with the key. It turned, clicked. Nothing. The world tilted. The sun burned overhead. My daughter lay still beside me. The last thing I saw before everything went dark was my son's boat, growing smaller and smaller on the horizon. It never once turned around. When I woke the second time, I didn't waste time on panic. I shifted into a state I'd learned decades ago, survival mode. The sun was lower now. Still brutal, still relentless, but angled differently. I'd been unconscious for hours. I sat up slowly, testing my body. Headache, dry mouth, limbs stiff and sore. But I could move. I could think. Abigail was still asleep beside me, curled under the life vest I'd draped over her face. Her breathing was steady. Her pulse when I checked was strong. Thank God. I turned my attention to the boat. This time I looked at everything, not with fear, but with purpose. The engine. I knelt beside it and opened the cover. The key was gone, yes, but that wasn't the only problem. The ignition cable had been disconnected, not broken, not frayed, cleanly removed. Someone had done this on purpose. I sat back on my heels, staring at the empty space where the cable should have been. Warren had spent a long time checking this engine at the marina. Too long. Now I knew why. I moved to the storage compartment. Inside, I found 2 water bottles, one opened, one sealed, a single energy bar, a small first aid kit with bandages and antiseptic wipes, the thermos still half full of that sweet poison tea, and the note, still tucked under the rock where I'd found it. I unfolded it carefully, read it again. Warren's handwriting. His words. "I'm sorry, Mom, but you left us no choice." I folded it back up, slipped it into the waterproof pocket of my jacket. Evidence. I assessed our resources. 2 bottles of water, maybe 30 ounces total. In this heat with 2 people, that would last 12 hours at best. The energy bar wouldn't help much. We had no shade except the life vests. No oars, no radio, no flares. Abigail stirred. Her eyes opened slowly, confused. "Mom." "I'm here, baby." I helped her sit up, handed her the open water bottle. "Drink. Slowly." She obeyed, her lips cracked and dry. "What happened?" "We got lost," I said. It wasn't a lie. Not exactly. She looked around at the empty lake, the distant mountains. "Where's Warren?" "He went ahead. We'll catch up." Another lie. But I couldn't tell her the truth. Not yet. I did the math. The shoreline was maybe 2 miles away, maybe 3. Too far for Abigail to swim, especially in her condition. But I could make it. I'd swum farther in college, back when my body was younger and stronger. If I left now, I could reach land before dark, find help, come back. If I stayed, we'd both die out here. Abigail listened to me. I held her face in my hands. "I need you to stay on this boat. Don't jump in the water. Don't waste energy shouting. If you see another boat, wave, but don't scream. Save your strength." Her eyes widened. "You're leaving." "I'm going to get help. I'll be back. I promise." "No." Her voice broke. "Don't leave me like Warren did." The words hit me like a fist. I pulled her close, held her tight. "I am nothing like Warren. I am your mother. I will come back for you. Do you understand me?" She nodded against my shoulder, sobbing. I found a pen in the first aid kit. On the back of Warren's note, I wrote Diane Sullivan, 52, Abigail Sullivan, 12, drugged and abandoned, Lake Mojave, June 14th. I tucked it under the sealed water bottle where it would stay dry. Then I kissed Abigail's forehead, adjusted her life vest, and climbed to the edge of the boat. The water was colder than I expected. It shocked my system, jolted me fully awake. I looked back one last time. Abigail sat small and alone in that drifting boat, watching me with wide, terrified eyes. Then I started swimming, because if I didn't swim, we would both die out here. The water seemed endless. Every stroke burned. Every breath was a battle. But I kept going, because mothers don't have the luxury of giving up. I swam steadily, not fast. I couldn't afford speed. I needed endurance. My arms ached. My legs felt like lead. Lake water splashed into my eyes, my nose, my mouth. I swallowed some choked, coughed it back up, kept swimming. I thought about Warren. Warren at 7 helping me bake cookies in our tiny apartment kitchen. Warren at 10 hugging me tight after his father left and whispering, "I'll always take care of you, Mom." Warren at 15 winning the math competition. I'd been so proud. What happened to that boy? When did he change? I knew the answer. Heather. 3 years ago, when he brought her home for Thanksgiving, I saw it immediately. The way she looked at our house, calculating. The way she asked about my retirement plan, my assets, my insurance. Warren started asking for money after that. $5,000 for a business opportunity, $10,000 for a down payment, $15,000 to cover debt. It was never enough. When did money become more important than your own mother? My arms cramped. I paused, treading water, gasping for air. The shore still looked impossibly far. I turned back. The boat was a tiny dot now. I couldn't see Abigail anymore. Panic clawed at my chest. What if she fell in? What if another boat found her and didn't believe her story? What if no one found her at all? I started swimming again, harder this time. Too hard. My muscles screamed in protest. Slow down, pace yourself. But I couldn't. My baby was out there alone. My husband's voice echoed in my memory. "You're the strongest person I've ever known, Diane." He'd said that during chemo, during the awful final months when he could barely stand and I held him up anyway. When I worked full-time and cared for him and made sure Abigail still got to soccer practice and piano lessons. "You're the strongest person I've ever known." I had to be strong now. For Abigail. For him. For myself. My arms moved mechanically. Stroke. Breathe. Stroke. Breathe. My mind went somewhere else, somewhere numb and distant. My body kept going on autopilot. The sun was setting. The water turned gold, then orange, then gray. I looked up. The shore was closer. I could see details now. Rock formations, scrub brush, a dirt road winding along the ridgeline. 500 meters, maybe less. I can make it. I can make it. My hand hit something solid. Rock. Shallow water. I dragged myself forward, crawling through the shallows, pulling my body up onto the sand and stone. My legs gave out. I collapsed onto the hot, rough ground, gasping, shaking. I'd made it. I lay there for a long moment, staring up at the sky. It was deep blue now, fading to purple at the edges. Stars were beginning to appear. I made it. Now I have to save Abigail. I tried to stand. My legs buckled. I forced myself up again, stumbled forward, fell. "Get up! Get up!" I was on my hands and knees, sobbing, exhausted when I heard it. The sound of salvation. The rumble of a truck engine. Chester Hayes was 63 years old, drove a beat-up Ford, and he saved my life without even knowing it. He slammed on the brakes the moment he saw me. I was on my hands and knees at the edge of the dirt road, soaked and shaking, barely able to lift my head. "Ma'am, you okay?" I looked up at him. Gray hair, sun-weathered face, kind eyes. "My daughter," I croaked. "Boat. On the lake, please." He didn't hesitate. He pulled out his phone, dialed 911, and helped me into the passenger seat. He wrapped a blanket around my shoulders and handed me a bottle of water. "Drink slow," he said. "Where's your daughter?" I told him. "Lake Mojave. Small motorboat. 12 years old. Alone." He relayed everything to the dispatcher, then started driving toward the marina, fast but steady, one hand on the wheel, the other holding the phone. "They're sending the Coast Guard," he said. "They'll find her." I nodded, clutching the water bottle, praying he was right. 45 minutes later, they did. Abigail was dehydrated, sunburned, and terrified, but alive. They brought her to the same urgent care clinic where Chester had taken me. She cried when she saw me, and I held her so tight I thought I might break her. "I'm here, baby, I'm here." They put us in separate rooms. Nurses hooked us up to IV lines, checked our vitals, applied ointment to our burns. My arms were raw from the sun and the swim. Abigail's face was bright red, her lips cracked and swollen. Nurse Ramirez, a woman in her 30s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, sat beside me as the IV dripped into my arm. "How did this happen?" she asked gently. I told her everything. The rental house, the thermos, the 2 boats, Warren and Heather disappearing, waking up alone in the middle of the lake with the engine sabotaged. Nurse Ramirez's expression darkened. "That doesn't sound like an accident." "It wasn't," I said. She nodded slowly. "I'm calling the police." Within an hour, Detective Jennifer Cole arrived. She was in her 40s, tall and composed, with dark hair pulled back in a bun. She carried a notebook and a quiet intensity that made me feel, for the first time since this nightmare began, like someone was actually listening. She sat across from me and let me talk. I told her about the land in Mojave County, the $5.5 million. Warren's phone calls his pressure to sign over the property, the email about maternal capacity evaluation, the invitation to Lake Mojave, Heather's thermos, the missing oars and disabled engine, the note I'd found under the rock. Detective Cole took notes, asked questions, didn't interrupt. When I finished, she said, "Do you still have the note?" I reached into the waterproof pocket of my jacket. The note was damp but intact. I handed it to her. She read it, her expression unreadable. Then she looked up. "We'll need the thermos too." "It's still on the boat," I said. "Or it should be." "We recovered it," she said. "We'll test the contents. We'll also need blood samples from you and Abigail." They drew our blood that evening. 2 days later, the lab results came back benzodiazepines, both of us. A sedative strong enough to knock out a grown woman and a child for hours. Detective Cole came back to see me at the hotel where I was staying with Abigail. She sat at the small table by the window and opened her notebook. "Mrs. Sullivan, this is attempted murder and child endangerment. Who would want to harm you?" I didn't hesitate. "My son, Warren Sullivan." She didn't look surprised. "Tell me everything." So I did. I told her about Warren's debts, his obsession with the land, his wife Heather's cold calculation. I told her about the 2 boats, the disabled engine, the deliberate separation. I told her how they'd watched us drink from that thermos and then sailed away. Detective Cole wrote it all down. Then she looked up, her gaze steady. "We'll need to verify a few things. The boat rental records, surveillance footage from the marina, witness statements. But based on what you've told me and the physical evidence, I'm opening a full investigation." Relief flooded through me so strong I almost started crying again. "We'll get him," she said. "I promise you that." She stood, closed her notebook, and looked me straight in the eye. "Mrs. Sullivan, I believe you. Now let's prove it." Coming home should have felt safe, but it didn't, because even from a distance, Warren was still trying to destroy me. Abigail didn't speak much on the drive back to Chandler. She sat in the passenger seat, staring out the window, her hands folded tightly in her lap. When we got home, she followed me from room to room, unwilling to be alone. That night, she crawled into bed with me. She hadn't done that since she was 6. "It's okay, baby," I whispered, stroking her hair. "We're safe now." But I wasn't sure I believed it. On the 3rd day, Home Detective Cole called. "We pulled Warren's phone records," she said. "In the 9 hours after you went missing, he made 2 calls, both to lawyers. He didn't call 911. Didn't call the Coast Guard, didn't report you missing." I closed my eyes. My hand tightened around the phone. "He knew you were out there," she continued, "and he did nothing." I should have been shocked, but I wasn't. Some part of me had already known. "There's more. Detective Cole said. We talked to Jerry Wallace, the marina attendant. He said Warren and Heather returned the boat around 4 that afternoon. Calm, relaxed. They joked about the weather. They didn't ask about your boat, didn't mention you at all. My stomach turned. We're also digging into Warren's finances, she went on. He owes $520,000. Business loans, credit cards, gambling debts. His wife Heather has another $80,000 in credit card debt. They're 3 months behind on their mortgage. Foreclosure notices have been filed. $500,000. Suddenly, the $5.5 million plot of land in Mojave County made perfect sense. Mrs. Sullivan, your son was desperate. Desperate people do dangerous things. I thanked her and hung up. 10 minutes later, the doorbell rang. A courier handed me a thick envelope, legal papers. I opened it with shaking hands. Emergency petition for mental capacity evaluation and temporary guardianship of minor child Abigail Sullivan. They were suing me. Warren and Heather were suing me for custody of Abigail, claiming I was mentally unfit. I sat down at the kitchen table and read through the document. It painted a picture of a woman who was unstable, erratic, neglectful, a woman who had put her daughter in danger. They were flipping the story, making me the villain. I called Jonathan Webb, the attorney Sandra had recommended. His retainer was $25,000. I agreed without hesitation. Jonathan came to my house that afternoon. He was in his 50s, silver-haired, sharp-eyed. They're trying to flip the narrative, he said, scanning the petition. Paint you as unstable so they can control Abigail and the estate. Bold move, considering they're under investigation for attempted murder. Can they win? I asked. Not if we fight smart. We have the police report, the medical evidence, the note, the disabled boat, the drugs in your system. We have facts on our side. He looked at me seriously. But this is going to get ugly. They're going to attack your character, your judgment, your fitness as a mother. Are you ready for that? I thought of Abigail upstairs, scared and silent. I thought of Warren sailing away, leaving us to die. I'm ready, I said. I want him in prison. Over the next week, Detective Cole kept digging. She called with updates, subpoenaed bank records, interviewed witnesses, reviewed surveillance footage. I'm checking everything, she said. Insurance policies, legal documents, emails. If there's something there, I'll find it. I believed her. 3 days later, she called again. Her voice was different this time, tighter. Mrs. Sullivan, we found something. A life insurance policy in your name. My blood went cold. How much? I asked. $2 million. Beneficiary Warren Sullivan. It was taken out 6 months ago. I thought the worst thing was that my son tried to kill me. I was wrong. The worst thing was discovering he'd been planning it for 6 months. Detective Cole's voice on the phone was steady, but I could hear the tension underneath. Mrs. Sullivan, you need to sit down for this. I was already sitting. My hands gripped the edge of the kitchen table. 6 months ago, Warren took out a life insurance policy on you. $2 million. Beneficiary Warren Sullivan. The room tilted. I didn't know. You signed something, Detective Cole said. Do you remember? I did. Suddenly I did. Warren had come over in January. He'd brought papers. Estate planning documents, he called them. To protect you and Abigail, he'd said. Make sure everything's in order. I'd trusted him. I'd signed without reading carefully. That wasn't estate planning, Detective Cole said quietly. That was a life insurance application, and he made himself the beneficiary. $2 million. Plus the $5.5 million land in Mojave County. $8 million total. If you died out there on that lake, she continued, Warren would have collected $2 million within a few weeks. Add the land he'd inherit as your next of kin, and he'd have walked away with nearly $8 million. I couldn't speak. Tears ran down my face, not from fear, from heartbreak. He'd calculated my death like an investment. There's more, Detective Cole said. We got a warrant for his laptop. We found his search history. She read them aloud slowly. How long does it take to die from dehydration? 3 weeks before the trip, Lake Mojave drowning statistics. 2 weeks before, life insurance payout time for accidental death. 1 week before. Are beneficiaries investigated if death is accidental? 3 days before. I covered my mouth with my hand. Oh my God, he researched it. He planned every detail. Mrs. Sullivan, this wasn't a rash decision. This was premeditated murder for financial gain. I thought about Warren as a little boy, the way he used to hold my hand crossing the street, the way he'd run to me when he fell off his bike crying, needing comfort, the way he'd once told me at 10 years old, "I'll always take care of you, Mom." When had that boy disappeared? When had he become this Jonathan Webb came over that afternoon? He reviewed the evidence Detective Cole had sent over the insurance policy, the search history, the financial records, the note from the boat. "This is strong," he said, leaning back in his chair. "The district attorney will prosecute. Attempted murder, conspiracy, child endangerment. Warren and Heather are looking at serious prison time." But then he looked at me seriously. "Warren will fight. He'll use the mental capacity angle. He'll try to paint you as unstable, forgetful, unreliable. We need to be ready." "I'm ready," I said. Sandra came over that evening. She wrapped her arms around me and held me while I cried. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I always knew Heather was bad news, but Warren, I never thought." "I didn't either," I said. "That's the worst part." Sandra pulled back, looked at me with fierce eyes. "You're going to fight this. You're going to win. And that boy is going to pay for what he did." I nodded, wiping my tears. I looked across the room at Abigail asleep on the couch, her face still red from sunburn. She looked so small, so fragile. Warren had been willing to kill her too, his own little sister, a 12-year-old child, for money. What kind of monster had I raised? That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the search history. How long does it take to die from dehydration? He'd sat at his computer typing that into Google, calculating how long it would take for his own mother to die of thirst in the desert sun. And then he'd invited me to the lake. He'd smiled, he'd hugged me, he'd handed me that thermos. Knowing. 2 weeks later, Detective Cole called again. "Mrs. Sullivan, we found something else." My stomach dropped. "What? A will, a forged will, in your name." I closed my eyes. "It gets worse," she said quietly. "He forged your signature using a birthday card you sent him 2 years ago. They say facing your demons is hard. They don't tell you what it feels like when your demon is your own son." I walked into the courtroom on a cold morning in October, 3 months after Lake Mojave. Jonathan Webb was beside me, his hand briefly on my shoulder. Abigail stayed home with Sandra. She wasn't ready to see Warren yet. Neither was I, but I didn't have a choice. Warren sat at the defense table. He wore a suit I'd never seen before, navy blue, expensive. His hair was cut short. He looked thinner, older. He didn't look at me. Heather sat beside him, perfectly composed, hands folded in her lap. She glanced at me once, her expression blank, as if I were a stranger. The judge entered. We all stood. "The state of Arizona versus Warren Sullivan and Heather Sullivan," the clerk announced. The charges were read aloud. Attempted murder in the first degree, child endangerment, conspiracy to commit murder. Warren stared straight ahead. District Attorney Margaret Rhodes stood to give her opening statement. She was in her mid-40s, sharp-eyed, commanding. Her voice filled the courtroom. "This case is about greed," she began. "About a son who valued $8 million more than his own mother's life." She walked toward the jury, making eye contact with each of them. "The evidence will show that Warren Sullivan systematically planned, researched, and executed a plot to murder his mother, Diane Sullivan, and his 12-year-old sister, Abigail Sullivan. He purchased a life insurance policy on his mother without her knowledge. He researched how long it takes to die from dehydration. He disabled a boat. He drugged them both. And then he sailed away and left them to die." The jury listened, riveted. The defense attorney stood next. He was younger, polished, confident in a way that felt rehearsed. "This is a tragic misunderstanding," he said smoothly. "Warren Sullivan loves his mother. What happened on Lake Mojave was a series of unfortunate events, not murder. We will show that the evidence is circumstantial, incomplete, and misinterpreted. But his words felt hollow. Even he didn't seem to believe them. D.A. Rhodes called her first witness. An insurance agent testified about the $2 million policy. Warren had applied for it. Warren was the beneficiary. Diane had signed the paperwork believing it was estate planning. Did Mrs. Sullivan know this was a life insurance policy with her son as beneficiary? Rhodes asked. No, ma'am. She was told it was part of a family trust protection plan. Next came the forensic computer analyst. He walked the jury through Warren's search history displayed on a large screen for everyone to see. How long does it take to die from dehydration? Lake Mojave drowning statistics. Life insurance payout time for accidental death. Are beneficiaries investigated if death is accidental? The jury stared at the screen. One woman covered her mouth. Another shook her head slowly. The defense attorney objected. Searches alone don't prove intent, Your Honor. Overruled, the judge said. The jury will decide relevance. Then came the physical evidence. The thermos. Heather's fingerprints on the lid. Warren's fingerprints on the body of the container. The toxicology report. Benzodiazepines found in the thermos matched exactly the drugs found in Diane and Abigail's bloodstreams. The boat. Photographs showed the disconnected engine cable, the missing oars, the deliberate sabotage. D.A. Rhodes held up the photographs for the jury to see. She let them sit with the images. Let them absorb what they were seeing. This was not an accident. This was sabotage. This was attempted murder. Warren shifted in his seat. His hands trembled. He whispered something urgent to his lawyer, who shook his head. Heather remained motionless, staring straight ahead. D.A. Rhodes turned back to the jury. And this is just the beginning. Because Warren Sullivan didn't just plan to kill his mother. He planned to steal from her, even after she was dead. She paused, letting the words settle over the courtroom. Your Honor, the state would like to introduce Exhibit 47, a forged will. The courtroom went silent. I thought the insurance discovery was the worst betrayal until they brought out the birthday card. The card I'd written with all my love, the card he'd used to forge my will. D.A. Rhodes stood before the jury holding a document. During a search of the defendant's residence, we found this. She held it up. The last will and testament of Diane Sullivan, dated 1 year ago. It leaves 70% of Mrs. Sullivan's estate to Warren Sullivan and 30% to Abigail Sullivan. The signature looked real. It looked like mine. I stood up, my heart pounding. I never signed that. The judge looked at me. Mrs. Sullivan, please sit down. You'll have your turn. Jonathan pulled me gently back into my seat. D.A. Rhodes continued. The state calls document examiner Dr. Patricia Thornton. An older woman in glasses took the stand. She was calm, methodical, precise. Doctor. Thornton, can you tell the jury about this? Yes, this signature is a forgery, a high-quality forgery, but a forgery nonetheless. The signature was digitally scanned from another document and placed onto this one. The jury leaned forward. And did you identify the source document? Yes, we did. D.A. Rhodes walked to the evidence table and picked up a plastic sleeve. Inside was a birthday card. My chest tightened. She held it up for the jury to see. On the front, a cheerful birthday design with balloons. Inside, my handwriting, Happy Birthday, Warren. I'm so proud of the man you've become. I will always love you. Mom. My signature at the bottom. Mom, in my handwriting. Dr. Thornton continued. The signature on the forged will matches this birthday card signature perfectly. Pixel for pixel. D.A. Rhodes projected both signatures side by side on the screen. They overlapped exactly. Someone scanned this signature and digitally placed it onto the forged will. Murmurs spread through the courtroom. D.A. Rhodes turned to me. Mrs. Sullivan, did you give your son permission to use your signature on estate documents? I could barely speak. Tears ran down my face. No. I wrote that card to tell him I loved him, and he used it to steal from me, even after I was supposed to be dead. One of the jurors wiped her eyes. Another shook his head in disgust. D.A. Rhodes turned to the jury. Ladies and gentlemen, this shows planning, intent, malice. Warren Sullivan didn't just plan to kill his mother. He planned to profit twice, once from the insurance payout and again from a fraudulent inheritance. She let that sink in. If Diane Sullivan had died on that lake, Warren would have collected $2 million in life insurance within weeks, and then with this forged will, he would have claimed 70% of her estate, including the $5.5 million land. Suddenly, Warren stood up. Heather said it was just a backup plan in case. His lawyer grabbed his arm, hissing, "Warren, sit down now." But the damage was done. The jury had heard it. Heather's head snapped toward Warren. She glared at him, teeth clenched. "Shut up!" D.A. Rhodes turned slowly toward Warren, her voice deadly calm. "A backup plan. A backup plan for what, Mr. Sullivan? For after you murdered your mother." The defense attorney shot to his feet. Objection, argumentative. Sustained, the judge said. But the jury will not be able to forget what the defendant just said. Warren sank back into his chair, pale and trembling. Heather stared straight ahead, jaw-tight fury radiating off her. I looked at my son, not with anger, with something deeper. Something that hurt more than rage ever could. Sadness. I stood again, slowly this time. Jonathan didn't stop me. The judge didn't either. I looked directly at Warren. "I wrote, 'I will always love you' on that card," I said, my voice breaking, "and you turned my love into a weapon." Warren finally looked at me. For just a second I saw something in his eyes. Shame, maybe. Regret. Then he looked away. The prosecution rested. Now it was my turn. My turn to step up to the witness stand. My turn to look my son in the eye and tell the world what he'd done. You just saw my love turned into evidence. Still with me? Comment 1. Quick note. This narrative blends real pain with storytelling elements, some details shaped for impact, not literal fact. Feel free to exit if that's not your thing. They asked me if I was ready to testify. I wasn't. But I did it anyway. Because sometimes courage isn't being ready. It's doing it even when you're terrified. I walked to the witness stand, raised my right hand, and swore to tell the truth. The whole truth. I sat down. I looked at the jury. I didn't look at Warren. Not yet. D.A. Rhodes approached. "Mrs. Sullivan, can you tell the court what happened that morning on Lake Mojave?" I took a breath. My voice was steady. Heather gave us a thermos. She said it was herbal tea, chamomile and mint. She insisted we drink it, said it would help with motion sickness. I paused, remembering. Abigail drank first. Then I did. It tasted sweet. A little strange, but I trusted them. 20 minutes later, I could barely keep my eyes open. Abigail collapsed beside me. I tried to start the engine, but the key was gone. I looked for the oars. They were gone too. My voice cracked. And then I saw Warren's boat, getting smaller, leaving us there. "What did you think in that moment?" D.A. Rhodes asked gently. "I thought, my son is leaving me to die, the child I raised. The boy I sacrificed everything for." Tears fell down my face. And his sister. He left Abigail, a 12-year-old child. What went through your mind when you woke up? Survival. I had to save Abigail. I couldn't think about why Warren did this. I just had to live. Tell us about the swim. I described it. The cold water. The exhaustion. Thinking about Abigail alone on that boat. Wanting to give up but pushing myself forward. "I didn't think about the money or the land," I said. "I thought about all the times I held Warren when he was scared, when he was sick, when he needed me." I broke down, and I wondered when I stopped being his mother and just became an obstacle. Several jurors were crying. One man wiped his eyes with his sleeve. D.A. Rhodes let the moment sit. Then she asked, "Mrs. Sullivan, do you love your son?" I looked down at my hands. I did. I still do. That's what makes this so hard. Because after everything, he's still my son. But he tried to kill me, and I have to live with that. The defense attorney stood for cross-examination. He was polished, aggressive. Mrs. Sullivan, isn't it possible Warren thought you'd be found quickly, that this was just a miscalculation, not murder? I looked at him directly. He took the engine key, he removed the oars, he drugged us. He researched how long it takes to die from dehydration. Does that sound like a miscalculation, or does it sound like murder? You've been under stress, the grief after your husband's death, financial pressure. Perhaps you misremembered. I cut him off. I remember everything. The taste of that tea, the look on Heather's face as their boat pulled away, the note Warren left. I remember all of it. He tried a few more questions, but I didn't break. DeRodes stood for redirect. Mrs. Sullivan, do you have anything you'd like to say to your son? The courtroom went silent. I finally looked at Warren. He looked back at me for the first time since the trial began. Tears streamed down his face. I want to ask you one question, Warren. Just one. I paused. Was my life really only worth $8 million to you? Because to me, you were priceless. Warren sobbed. He dropped his head into his hands, shoulders shaking. Heather rolled her eyes. The jury saw it. I stepped down from the stand. I didn't look at Warren again. I've said what needed to be said, I told Jonathan. Now it's up to the jury. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. 6 hours of waiting in a small room with Abigail and Sandra, drinking bad coffee, pacing, praying. When the clerk called us back, my heart was pounding so hard, I thought I might collapse. I held Abigail's hand and waited for the words that would define the rest of our lives. I'd imagined this moment 100 times, the moment the jury would say, guilty. I thought I'd feel victorious. Instead, I just felt tired. The jury filed back in after 6 hours. Their faces were serious, unreadable. The judge looked at them. Has the jury reached a verdict? The foreman stood. He was an older man, gray-haired, wearing glasses. Yes, Your Honor, we have. The courtroom went silent. You could have heard a pin drop. I held Abigail's hand on one side. Jonathan Webb sat on the other. My heart pounded so hard I thought everyone could hear it. The judge spoke. On the charge of attempted murder in the first degree, how do you find the defendant, Warren Sullivan? The foreman's voice was clear and steady. Guilty. Zatzor, a collective exhale swept through the room. Someone behind me whispered, thank God. On the charge of child endangerment, guilty. On the charge of conspiracy to commit murder, guilty. Warren dropped his head onto the table. His shoulders shook. The judge turned to the other side of the defense table. And for the defendant, Heather Sullivan. The foreman repeated the verdicts. Guilty, guilty, guilty. Heather showed no emotion. She just stared straight ahead, her jaw tight. The judge thanked the jury and dismissed them. He set the sentencing hearing for 2 weeks later. I didn't celebrate. I just exhaled. A long, shaky breath I felt like I'd been holding for months. Abigail leaned against me. Does this mean we're safe now, Mom? I kissed the top of her head. Yes, baby, we're safe now. 2 weeks later, we returned for sentencing. The judge looked down at Warren from the bench. Mr. Sullivan, you have been convicted of conspiring to murder your own mother and endangering the life of your 12-year-old sister for financial gain. I find your actions to be among the most callous and calculated I have ever seen in this courtroom. Warren kept his head down. You are sentenced to 25 years in state prison. You will not be eligible for parole for 15 years. Warren's head shot up. Mom, I'm sorry, The judge cut him off. You'll have time to think about that apology, Mr. Sullivan. He turned to Heather. Mrs. Sullivan, while you may not have been the originator of this plan, you were an active and willing participant. You are sentenced to 20 years in state prison. For the first time, Heather reacted. She stood up, her voice sharp. This is ridiculous. He was the one who... The judge's gaze was ice. Mrs. Sullivan, sit down, or I will add contempt of court to your sentence. Heather sat glaring. The bailiffs moved forward. Warren and Heather were led out in handcuffs. Warren looked back at me one last time. His lips moved. "I'm sorry." I looked away. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Cameras flashed. Microphones were thrust toward me. I gave a brief statement. "Justice was served today, but healing will take much longer. My daughter and I are focused on moving forward." Jonathan guided us through the crowd to his car. Abigail held my hand tightly. Sandra waited by the vehicle, arms open. The trial was over, but my journey wasn't, because now I had to learn to live with what my son had done. They say closure is a gift you give yourself, so I drove 2 hours to a state prison to give myself that gift, and to say goodbye to my son. Forever. 3 weeks after the trial, I sat in Jonathan Webb's office signing papers. "This establishes an irrevocable trust for Abigail," he explained. "The $5.5 million property is locked until she turns 25. It cannot be sold, mortgaged, or touched by anyone, not even you." "Good," I said. "This is hers. No one can take it from her again." Jonathan helped me cut every legal tie to Warren. We closed joint accounts, removed his name from emergency contacts, medical proxies, beneficiary designations. I changed the locks on my house, blocked his phone number. The insurance company voided the $2 million policy for fraud and filed a civil suit against Warren. He'd be paying them back for the rest of his life. Abigail started therapy with Dr. Elizabeth Parker, a child psychologist Sandra recommended. "She's resilient, doctor," Parker told me after the 3rd session, "but she needs time. The nightmares are normal. The trust issues are predictable." Oh, one afternoon, Abigail asked me, "Why did Warren do it?" I didn't have a good answer. Dr. Parker did. "Sometimes people make very bad choices," she told Abigail gently. "It's not your fault, and it's not your mom's fault." But I wasn't sure I believed that. I started therapy too. My own sessions were harder than I expected. I felt relief that we were safe, grief for the son I thought I had, rage at the betrayal, and guilt. Did I miss signs? Could I have stopped this? My therapist shook her head. "You didn't do anything wrong. Warren made his own choices." Sandra visited often. She brought groceries, sat with me when I couldn't stop crying, took Abigail to movies when I needed to be alone. "You're the strongest person I know," she said one night over tea. "You saved yourself and Abigail." "I didn't have a choice," I said. "You always have a choice, and you chose to survive." One afternoon, a letter arrived from the state prison. From Warren. He was asking me to visit. "Please, Mom, I need to talk to you. I'm sorry, please." I stared at the letter for 3 days. "You don't owe him anything," Jonathan said when I called him, but I decided to go. Not for Warren, for me. "I need closure," I told Sandra. "I'll go once, that's it." The prison was cold and gray. I sat behind a glass partition, picked up the phone. Warren appeared on the other side. He looked thinner, older, hollow. "Mom, thank you for coming." "I didn't think you would." I almost didn't. "I'm sorry, I was desperate. Heather kept pushing, but I chose to do it. That's on me. I'm so sorry." "Do you know what you did to Abigail?" I asked. "She checks the locks 3 times before bed. She has nightmares. She flinches when someone says your name." Warren's face crumpled. "I never wanted to hurt her. I needed the money so bad." "Oh, you had choices, Warren. You could have asked me for help. You could have filed for bankruptcy. You could have done 1,000 things that didn't involve trying to kill your own mother." Silence. "Will you ever forgive me?" he asked. "I already have," I said. "Not for you, for me, because I won't let your choices destroy the rest of my life." His eyes filled with hope. "Will you come again? Maybe someday bring Abigail." I stood up. "No, Warren, I came to say goodbye, that's all." "Mom, please." "Goodbye, Warren." I hung up the phone, walked away, didn't look back. In the parking lot, I sat in my car and cried for 10 minutes, not for the man in prison, for the little boy who used to hold my hand, the boy who was gone. Then I drove home to Abigail. I decided we needed to leave Chandler, Too many memories, too many ghosts. Abigail and I would start over. Somewhere new, somewhere safe. 6 months after the trial, I did something I hadn't done in over a year. I smiled. A real smile. Because for the first time, I felt like we were actually going to be okay. We moved to a small town 2 hours from Chandler, far enough to feel like a fresh start, close enough that Sandra could still visit. The house was modest. 3 bedrooms, a small yard, a quiet street in a safe neighborhood. Nothing fancy, but it was ours. Abigail picked out the paint for her room. Yellow walls string lights across the ceiling posters of her favorite bands. She had a say in everything. Control mattered now. The backyard had a small swing set. I'd push her sometimes even though she was 12 and insisted she was too old, but she never told me to stop. Abigail was still in therapy, but she was better. She made 2 new friends at school, Emma and Sophie. They came over for sleepovers, giggled over pizza, painted each other's nails. The nightmares dropped from every night to once a week, then once every 2 weeks. She laughed more. She trusted again, slowly, carefully. But she was learning. I kept working as a freelance accountant. The beauty of my job was I could do it anywhere. Numbers didn't care where I lived. But I also started volunteering at a local women's center, helping survivors of domestic violence, women who'd been betrayed by family, by partners, by people they loved. I found purpose in that. If my story could help even one person, it was worth telling. We built new rituals, Saturday morning pancakes, movie nights with comedies, only nothing dark. Abigail asked about getting a dog. I said maybe next year. Small joys rebuilt the bond between us. One evening, Abigail asked, "Mom, do you think Warren ever thinks about us?" I set down the dish I was washing. "I don't know, sweetheart, but I think about us, about how strong we are." "I'm glad we didn't die at that lake," she said quietly. I pulled her into a hug. "Me too, baby. Me too." Sandra visited once a month. She brought gifts for Abigail, shared gossip from Chandler, stayed for dinner. "You did it, Diane," she said one evening on the porch. "You really did it. New life. Fresh start." "We did it," I corrected. "You helped me through everything." That's what friends do. I sat on the porch at sunset, sometimes watching Abigail play in the yard, and for the first time in a long time, I felt peace. Not perfect, not fully healed, but okay, we survived. That was enough for now. I thought about the trust fund, the $5.5 million property locked away until Abigail turned 25. It was growing in value. By the time she could access it, it might be worth $10 million or more. She'd never have to worry about money, and she'd never have to depend on anyone who could hurt her. I thought about the future sometimes. Maybe someday I'd date again. Not now. Too soon. But someday. Maybe I'd take Abigail on vacation. The mountains. Definitely not a lake. Maybe I'd write the whole story down the way I was doing now. Maybe I'd help other survivors find their voices. I whispered to the sunset, "Thank you for the strength, for Chester, for Detective Cole, for Jonathan, for getting through this." Abigail ran up to the porch, breathless and grinning. "Mom, can we have tacos for dinner?" I laughed. "Absolutely, sweetheart. Tacos sound perfect." A simple moment, an ordinary moment, a beautiful moment. People ask me how I survived, how I got through it, how I forgave. So let me tell you, I learned that survival isn't something beautiful. It's not a Hollywood ending. It's messy, painful, and takes longer than you think, but it's possible. People ask me how I survived. The answer is simple. I didn't have a choice. When you have a child depending on you, you find strength you didn't know existed. Survival isn't heroic. It's desperate. It's clawing, fighting, and refusing to stop. I survived not because I was strong. I survived because I was terrified, and fear can be just as powerful as strength. I learned that when your body wants to quit, your mind can push you forward. When I was swimming toward shore, every muscle screaming, I kept thinking, one more stroke, just one more, and then another, and another. That's survival. Breaking the impossible into small, possible pieces. The worst betrayals always come from the people you trust most. I used to think family meant unconditional love. I learned that's not always true. It should be, but it isn't. Warren was my son. I gave him life. I raised him. I sacrificed for him. But he chose to become my enemy. And I had to choose myself. I had to choose Abigail. That's a choice no mother should have to make. But I made it. And I'd make it again. Money changes people. Or maybe it just reveals who they really are. $8 million. That's what my life was worth to Warren. My life and Abigail's childhood and every memory we'd ever made together. But to Abigail, I was everything. That's the difference. I would have given away every cent of that land if it meant I could have my son back, the son I thought existed, the boy who promised to take care of me. But that boy was gone. Maybe he never existed at all. I forgave Warren. People don't understand that. Forgiveness wasn't for him, it was for me. Carrying hatred is like drinking poison and waiting for the other person to die. I refused to let his choices poison the rest of my life. I forgave so I could move forward, so I could breathe, so I could sleep at night without rage eating me alive. But forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation. I forgave him, and I walked away. Forever. Those two things can coexist. You can forgive someone and still never speak to them again. I used to think I was a good judge of character. I raised Warren after all. How did I miss who he'd become? But I learned you can't control other people's choices. You can only control your own response. Warren made his choices. I made mine. Abigail asked me if she should trust people. I told her trust carefully. But don't let fear stop you from connecting. The world has more good people than bad. Chester Hayes proved that. Detective Cole proved that. Sandra proved that every single day. Blood doesn't make family. Love, loyalty, and respect make family. I have more family in Sandra than I ever had in Warren. You're allowed to leave toxic family. You're allowed to protect yourself. You're allowed to say no, to walk away, to choose peace over obligation. Family should be a source of safety, not danger. The court gave me justice. 25 years for Warren, 20 for Heather, but justice doesn't heal everything. It just gives you space to heal yourself. I don't celebrate Warren being in prison. I grieve the child he used to be. I grieve the relationship we'll never have, but I'm glad he can't hurt anyone else. That matters too. Healing isn't a straight line. Some days I'm strong. Some days I cry in the shower where Abigail can't hear me. Abigail has nightmares. I have moments of rage. We both have days where we don't want to get out of bed, but we're moving forward, slowly, imperfectly, together. And that's all we can do. One day at a time. One step at a time. One breath at a time. This is my story. This is our survival. And if just one person hears this and finds the courage to fight, to speak up, to survive, then telling it was worth every painful word. This is my story. A family drama story I never imagined would be mine. Looking back, I see my mistakes, the red flags I ignored because I wanted to believe in my son's goodness. Don't be like me. Don't ignore your gut when something feels wrong. Don't sign papers without reading every word. Don't trust blindly even family, especially when money's involved. But most of all, don't lose hope. When I was swimming toward that shore, exhausted and terrified, I prayed. I said, God, if you're listening, please let me save my daughter. And God answered. He sent Chester Hayes. He gave me strength I didn't know I had. I've learned that God doesn't always stop the storm. Sometimes he walks through it with you. When I sat in that courtroom facing my son, I felt God's presence. When I forgave Warren, it was God who softened my heart enough to let go of the hatred. Like so many grandma stories and family drama stories you hear, mine is about betrayal and survival. But unlike some grandma stories where bitterness takes root, I chose healing. Not because I'm strong, but because God carried me when I couldn't walk. My advice, protect yourself, set boundaries, choose your peace over family obligation. And when you're drowning, literally or figuratively, remember that God hasn't forgotten you. To those facing betrayal from family drama stories of your own, or listening to grandma's stories that echo this pain, you will survive. It won't be easy. It won't be quick. But with faith, support, and courage, you will come through. Abigail and I are proof. Warren chose $8 million over his mother's life. But to Abigail, I was everything. That's the difference between greed and love. I survived because I had no choice. I healed because I refused to let his choices poison my future. I forgave because hatred would have destroyed me. And now Abigail and I have a new life, a peaceful life, a life Warren can never touch again. I appreciate you listening to my entire journey. Drop a 2 in the comments if you made it this far. Just a heads up, this narrative includes dramatized elements for storytelling and reflection. If you're looking for something different, feel free to explore other content. Otherwise, I'd love your thoughts, and if this resonated with you, please share it or subscribe so more people can find hope in their darkest moments.